You move through life assuming that everything must come from something else. You look for origins. You look for beginnings. You look for explanations behind every appearance. This habit feels natural. It feels intelligent, yet you rarely question the habit itself. You rarely ask whether existence as such requires a source, or whether only particular forms require sources. Ibn Arabi challenged this unnoticed assumption. He asked whether the deepest reality comes into being at all. He questioned whether existence is produced, or whether production only applies to things that appear within existence. His proposal is simple but destabilizing. If something is truly fundamental, it cannot depend on something prior. The question is direct. Can something exist without being caused? Or more precisely, can something be its own source? Ibn Arabi worked within a philosophical and theological world deeply concerned with causality, creation, and divine power. Yet his primary interest was not constructing belief systems. It was examining what it means to say that something is. He treated metaphysics as investigation, not speculation. He returned again and again to the nature of being itself. His writings unsettled many because they weakened the idea that reality stands in need of an external explanation. If being itself does not originate, then even sacred narratives of creation must be understood differently. Why would a self-grounding reality threaten established structures of meaning and authority? You instinctively search for causes. When an event occurs, you ask what produced it. When a feeling arises, you ask where it came from. When you think about yourself, you look for formative experiences that explain who you are. This habit is useful. It solves practical problems. It supports learning, but usefulness does not make a principle universal. Without noticing, you extend this habit to existence itself. You assume that existence must have been produced in the same way objects are produced. But have you ever observed existence being produced? Or have you only observed forms changing? Is your belief in universal sourcing based on observation or on extrapolation? If everything requires a source, then every source must also have a source. And that source must have another source. Explanation never reaches completion. This is not merely a technical puzzle. It exposes a structural limit. If explanation never completes, then explanation cannot be the ultimate ground of existence. At some point, something must exist that does not require a prior explanation. Otherwise, nothing could exist at all. This is not a mystical claim. It is a logical necessity. Either something exists without being sourced, or existence is impossible. Which of these seems more coherent? Ibn Arabi argued that being itself does not originate. It does not arise. It does not begin. He did not mean that forms do not arise. He meant that the reality in which forms appear does not enter existence. Forms are contingent. They depend on conditions. They begin and end. Being is not a form. It is the condition that allows forms to appear at all. To say that being is caused is to treat it as one object among others. But being is not one object. It is that by which objects are. If it never began, can the language of origin apply to it at all? When Ibn Arabi used the word light, he was not referring to physical brightness. He was referring to self-knowing existence, that which knows itself simply by being what it is. Not something observed, not something perceived, but that by which perception and observation occur. In simpler terms, awareness. Not awareness of something, not a mental faculty, But the fact that experience is present at all. If awareness were dependent on something else, it would require a prior awareness to know it. Does self-knowing reality need external illumination? You notice thoughts. You notice sensations. You notice memories. Each appears within awareness. You never encounter a thought first and awareness later. You never encounter perception before awareness. Awareness is already present when anything appears. This suggests a simple ordering. Experience depends on awareness. Awareness does not depend on experience. If something is always present before what appears, it cannot be an effect of what appears. This leads to a quiet question. Can what is always already present be produced by what comes and goes? You tend to think of yourself as existing because something else sustains you, because biology functions, because society supports you, because history shaped you. All of this is true at the level of form. But form dependence is not necessarily existence dependence. Your body depends on conditions. Your personality depends on conditions. But does existence itself depend on conditions? Or do conditions appear within existence? You may be confusing the fragility of form with the fragility of being. Which of these has ever shown signs of disappearing? A self-sourcing reality cannot be owned. It cannot be distributed. It cannot be granted or withheld. If existence itself is self-existing, no authority stands between you and being. This threatens many structures. Religious structures, political structures, psychological structures. Dependence creates leverage. Self-existence removes it. The discomfort around this idea is not primarily intellectual. It is structural. If your deepest reality does not depend on permission, what narratives lose their power? Life continues as before. You still work. You still learn. You still relate. You still make mistakes. What changes is the underlying assumption. You no longer live as if existence must be earned. You no longer treat being as conditional. Effort becomes practical rather than existential. You act because action is needed, not because existence is at stake. This does not make you careless. It makes you less defensive. Stability shifts from external support to intrinsic presence. Does life become heavier or lighter when existence is no longer alone? You began with the belief that everything must come from somewhere. You examined that belief. You saw that causes explain changes, not being itself. You noticed that awareness is present before any particular experience. You noticed that existence is never encountered at the beginning. Nothing new appeared. Nothing disappeared. Only a misunderstanding loosened. If reality does not require a source, then the search for origin was misplaced. If what exists is its own source, what was ever missing? And if nothing was ever missing, what was the search really about?